I recognize the member from Todd, Representative Wiener.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I tone it down a notch, I guess. I speak today on an issue that strikes at the very core of good governance, legislative transparency, and moral responsibility that we owe to every citizen in this state. And that issue is the abuse of omnibus bills. Omnibus bills are not just a procedural flaw in our legislative process. They are a deliberate tactic used to obscure, manipulate, and bypass the public's right to transparency and accountability. And today I want to talk about how this practice not only violates sound legislative principles, but how it's being used right now to force Minnesotan taxpayers to participate in something that many of them find deeply objectionable. And that's the public funding of abortion. So I'll start with the basics. In civics class when I teach my kids, we discuss that bills should be addressed as one subject, and that it should be debated openly, and our elected officials should vote yes or no based on the issue alone. But that's not what we do here anymore. Instead, we get are bills that are hundreds, sometimes thousands of pages long, crammed with dozens of unrelated provisions, many of which have never even had proper hearings, and some of which would never survive a straight up or down vote on their own. This isn't just bad governance, it's dishonest. You know it and I know it. People in Minnesota know it. So let's talk specifically about the health bill. Tucked inside this bill are provisions for the public funding of abortion, paid for by you, the taxpayer. This isn't health care, this is a moral issue. It deserves its own debate, its own bill, and its own vote, but it didn't get that. Instead, it was buried inside of this bill, mixed with dozens of other unrelated measures, some good, some bad, but all lumped together in a way that forces members of this body to make an impossible choice. Do I vote for a bill because it includes funding for hospitals in my district, even though I oppose taxpayer-funded abortion, or do I vote against it and risk losing the health care investment my constituents desperately need? That's not democracy. That's coercion. And the people of Minnesota deserve better. So let me be clear. This is not just a debate about abortion, it's a debate about whether our government has the right to compel its citizens to violate their deeply held beliefs by funding something that they morally oppose. Minnesota taxpayers should not be forced to participate passively or otherwise in abortion. Whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, whether you believe abortion should be legal or restricted, we should all agree that no citizen should be compelled to fund the procedure with their tax dollars. This is a line we should never cross. But here's what's happening. When we allow omnibus bills to carry these kind of provisions without proper scrutiny, we hide from the people, we avoid the hard conversations, and we silence the voice of Minnesotans who deserve to be heard. So let me tell you what I've been hearing from my communities, from the people that live near me, from pastors, from small business owners, nurses, public school teachers, from parents who are barely making ends meet. They don't want their taxes going to fund abortion. They don't want it morally, they don't want it ethically, and they don't want it financially. And they don't understand how a state that talks so much about tolerance and inclusion can be so quick to dismiss their deeply held beliefs. Because that's exactly what's going on. And they're being told, pay up, be quiet, and don't listen or don't question where your money is going. It's not inclusion, that's tyranny masked as progress. So let me say once again, or be very clear about this, abortion is not health care. It's not the same as prenatal care. It's not the same as cancer screening. It's not the same as prescription drug programs. To place it under the same umbrella and to fund it as part of health care package is intellectually dishonest. We cannot have a real honest discussion about health care in Minnesota when we keep smuggling deeply controversial issues into massive bills. And we all know what's happening. We see it in the health bill, where these funded abortions are quietly normalized without the decency of a separate public vote. And I ask you, is this really the legacy we want to leave as lawmakers? Do you want to be remembered as a legislator that said one thing in public and did something very different behind closed doors? A legislator that hid legislation, that hid controversial policies, packaged and rammed through on party line votes? Or do we want to be remembered as a body that said, enough, this process is broken and we're going to fix it? We need to restore the integrity of this chamber. That means going back to single subject bills. That means we require separate votes on major issues, especially those that are moral and divisive. This means we stop playing games with Minnesotans' money and start governing with transparency and accountability. So let me say it again. This is not about abortion, this is how we govern. When we use omnibus bills to sneak in divisive policies, we undermine democracy. When we force taxpayer to fund things that violate their conscience, we erode trust in government. When we use complexity and confusion to get what we want politically, we lose the moral authority to lead. And when we forget that every dollar we spend comes from someone else's hard work, someone's paycheck, someone's sacrifice, we drift dangerously from our responsibilities as stewards of the public trust. Minnesota deserves a government that reflects their values, respects their freedoms, and spends their money with purpose and care. So today I call on my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to end the era of omnibus manipulation. Let's bring sunlight back into this chamber. Let's return to the principles of good governance, honest debate, and moral clarity. And above all, let's stand for the people who sent us here. Not just special interests, not the lobbyists, not the political machines, that everyday Minnesotans who expect their tax dollars to fund roads, bridges, and public safety, not controversial procedures they fundamentally oppose. Let's fix this broken system. Let's end taxpayers' funding of abortion. Let's bring real accountability back to our work, what we're supposed to be doing here. Vote transparency. Vote no on this bill.
I recognize the member from Morrison, Representative Kresha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we have in front of us a bill, House File 2435. I think I can read that, 2435. And I want to thank the chairs and all the members for putting this together. In the time that I've served here, one of the things that I realize is you can't control the wind, you can control the sail. And through all the work of the members, we have a bill that addresses many of the deficiencies and challenges that the residents in the district I represent have spoken to me about. For many, many sessions, we talked about the need for rural EMS. The fact that you can have all the health care in the world, but if nobody can get to you, it doesn't matter. And Representative Backer, if you haven't heard one of Representative Backer's speeches, and I think I could quote those probably as good as he could, but he is passionate about this. I have seen not only the policy side, but the passionate side of Representative Backer when unfortunate events have happened in the chamber, and he was one of the first ones to get there. And frankly, members, if Representative Backer could get from Browns Valley to every one of your districts on a call, I believe he would do that. And I say that with all the respect in the world. I know how hard your work is, and you delivered on that promise. Representative Backer and Representative Byerman, the chairs, you delivered on that promise that we needed to put rural EMS first. Alongside of that, there's direct payment program for our hospitals. Hospitals that so desperately need the funding and the support, and with the approval of the federal government, the rural hospitals can stay open. Because frankly, we can put all the money in the rural EMS we want, but if there's nowhere to go, again, we haven't served the constituents that are asking for it. As our populations age in rural Minnesota, as our families need more and more support, the programs must follow the population demographics, and you delivered on that with this bill. And the third one that I heard coming into this session was the rural pharmacies, the family-owned businesses that bought the pharmacy from the generation before them, promised to continue it through the town, promised to continue the services, not to compete with the large pharmacies, because frankly, those large pharmacies can be 30, 40, 60 miles away. They promised to deliver in their communities, and they were stuck with really bad fees and Medicaid reimbursements. You fixed that. You've helped that. So on behalf of the pharmacies that I've talked to and the people that have been in my office just saying, hey, I'm just trying to make this business go because I'm moving it from one generation to the next, and I'm trying to keep the community viable. On their behalf, Representative Backer and Representative Byerman, I say thank you. But there's other things here. Facing a $75 million target cut and a $175 million cut in the tails, we're able to deliver those three priorities. In addition, Representative Nadeau brought dementia, working on a disease that is terrible. And if you've cared for anybody with those ailments, you know how difficult it is, and anything that we can do to help is of great value. Spotting physical abuse. There's money in here to train people how to spot physical abuse. And if you've ever, and I hope you never have this, but if you've ever looked in the eyes of a child that is going through an abusive situation who can't speak and is just hoping beyond all hope that somebody will see that and be able to call attention to it and break that cycle, it's one of the most powerful things you can do. So to have money in here that trains and helps people see that, that's frankly amazing. I mean, the life of one child, I think of my 4 daughters and my son, and my goodness, if they were ever in a situation or if they were ever had somebody in that and they were crying for help and couldn't get it, that's horrific. And I've seen those children. I've seen those families. And it's a cyclical thing. And a lot of times it's fueled by poverty or chronic inebriation or an addiction. But there's cycles. And if we can just break that cycle, we can start to bring in hope, we can start to bring in recovery. And that starts with a simple provision like this of just spotting it, just asking the question, just finding a way to get to somebody, a small child who's in the darkest of the dark places. And the last one that I'll bring up, which I remember coming through Commerce, and Representative Stevenson is off the floor here, but members, we face an ailment and a demon so dark and deep that we don't even know it, and that is the social media addiction. And just the simple thing, I remember in committee when I heard this bill come up, and I thought to myself, and all of us that are familiar with technology, the tech companies are fighting a simple warning about social media. And I thought, my goodness, these are the smartest technology people who are squawking because they can't come up with a little code that I could write in 20 seconds with ChatGPT just to put a warning on. That's ridiculous. The kids today that are so addicted to screens and what it's doing to them, and it's doing something. We are going to look back on this day. I'm going to look back on it with my grandkids and my great-grandkids, and I'm going to wonder how we could have done more. This is eating their brains away. They're looking at screens and forgetting the power of the words and the stories that propel us to have individual and creative thoughts. This is a small provision with some of the largest repercussions and hopefully positive things that we can have. So yes, I'm a green vote on this. Yes, I am a green vote for the families that need the Medicaid. I'm a green vote for the families that are trying to get out of the most difficult spots. And in a time when we're looking at a $6 billion deficit, this might be one of the only beacons we have going forward. So thank you for the bill. I'll be voting green on this bill, and I hope we can get this to conference committee where you're going to make it better, Representative Bierman and Representative Becker.